This is the Griffin Podcast, episode number 97. We find ourselves this week in our agent plan. And the question on the table is, are successful real estate agents tripolar? Are you a home seller or maybe a home buyer who has questions about selling or buying residential property? Or maybe you're an agent who needs a plan. But in any of those cases, you can't seem to find an easy way to get your answers. Well, then, hey, you are definitely in the right place. I'm Danny Griffin, the founder of The Griffin and the host of the Ask-A-Griffin podcast. Now, to help you take immediate action to get started in the right direction, if you're a seller, a buyer, or an agent, you can take advantage of our free step-by-step guides that are waiting for you at griffincourses.com. That's GRIFFIN courses.com. Okay, let's get started. In this episode, like I said, we have 3 plans that are core to the Griffin philosophy, and those are seller plans, buyer plans, and agent plans, one of each. But we find ourselves talking to agents this time, and the question is sort of a strange one, but a provocative one. Are successful agents tripolar? So what does this mean? Well, first of all, this information was gleaned from the great book written by Michael Gerber, The E-Myth. And the E-Myth talks about this entrepreneurial myth, how real estate agents believe that maybe just because they can sell something, they can run a real estate agent business. And he says that's the problem with all small businesses. Not so. So what I gleaned from that book and what I learned was that the persona or the person who becomes this small business person, and by the way, if you're listening to this and you're not an agent or not endeavoring to be one, you're probably going to engage one in selling or buying real estate. Very high probability over your lifetime you'll do that. So you're looking for these characteristics of a good real estate agent, and that's somebody who knows how to run that small business that's about to help you. You see, a lot of you have a misperception as sellers and buyers that the brand or the company somehow miraculously does the work, and that's not the case. It's the agent. And some companies have very clear plans like the Griffin, and others don't. But they have great brands. Well, what's that have to do with serving you correctly? So to help everybody who might be listening to this, I don't care what brand you work for or you're an agent of, let me help you straighten this out. Let me put my coaching cap on here. The first persona number one is the visionary. Gerber calls that the entrepreneur. I'll call it the visionary because an entrepreneur is typically a creative-brained person. Somebody who wants to run their own business. And for the large majority, I mean, most of us in real estate agency, we are what is called independent contractor workers, right? That's what we are. Meaning we really are our own business, and you join that real estate agency who is also an independent contractor per se. I mean, they might be incorporated, they might not be, etc. But you get the point. You're not an employee. So you don't come in and just execute some plan and go home and punch the clock 9 to 5. Yes, there are some companies that try to bring in the employee model to this. It's very difficult. It's never really succeeded in the long run. Now we're going into a real estate correction, and all the people that have employees, guess what they just did to them? They laid them all off. Well, so that stinks too. So let's talk to you as an independent contractor. Be a visionary for a business that works. What does that mean? How do I grow a real estate agent business that works? You get a plan. Like I said, griffincourses.com. You can go get our plan, a wireframe. You don't have to work for us. Go get it. Go use it. And wireframe out how you run a successful real estate agent business. So now this entrepreneur who wants to be free, who wants to put their own personal branding all over it, now you have a vision for a business that structurally works with your brand on top of it. Good start. Persona number 2, this is the hardest one. Gerber calls this the manager. I'm going to go a little bit further and stretch it. The systems manager. The biggest learning curve that I had to go through was to recognize the importance of building systems and then managing them. Well, how do you do that? Well, what happens is, let's just say you didn't know how to do this at all and you join a brokerage and they don't have a plan, let's assume the worst case scenario, but they have a couple of top producers, I would start to shadow 3 of them so I got the law of averages working for me, and I'd start to document A through Z what they do. A through Z in a buyer, A through Z in a seller, and I'd ask questions, assuming they were even helpful, and I'd start to have checklists for sellers and buyers from A to Z, meaning when you first meet a buyer all the way through the end when they become a past client. I'd write down what happens, and then I'd spend a lot of time editing that. You have the basics of a system for yourself. You walk away with something memorialized and organized. That's a system. Now, of course, you can begin to say, well, that's a big list. Could I leverage software? Could I leverage marketing? Could I leverage other people to help me? Yes, and on it goes. So, but always fundamentally at the core, you're developing a management brain. So you have this vision for a wireframe business that works, starting with sellers and listings, moving into buyers. That's the right direction, by the way, for a real visionary business that works. And then you get into, okay, how do I get a listing? And then how do I organize it? How do I sell it? What do I do? All that's becoming a system. And what you're doing by actually taking those steps is you're managing the business. Gerber talks about that as working on the business. So the person that ends up working on the business more than anything is the manager, and in this case, the systems manager. That's how you do it. It's too patronizing to say, we're going to manage your business and then leave you hanging, okay? No, you have to develop simple systems and then manage those. And then the third persona, Gerber calls the technician. A little confusing because he's globally talking about a lot of sales businesses, but I'll speak to the real estate agent. I'll call you the assembly line worker. And what does that mean? Well, you just, hopefully, developed your management brain and mapped out A through Z on how a seller sells with you and how a buyer buys with you. Well, now you have to do the work that's on the list. So I always imagine myself talking to Henry Ford and Michael Gerber. Like, I know I have an imagination that takes me there pretty easily. So I always imagine myself walking into a factory, a Henry Ford assembly line. Now, these gents are not contemporaries. I met Michael Gerber at a ripe 80 years old. He's feisty. Henry's long since gone. But I've been a student of those types of people. So in my mind's eye, I see them coming to my factory. And I see us walking in the business end of the door, and we walk into this massive building where there's a manufacturing of relationships going on, just like Henry's cars, meaning I'm manufacturing relationships with contacts I meet who start as leads. They become my prospect. They become my client. They become my closing. They become my past client family. And ultimately, I want a happy past client family. I'm not worried about inflows and outflows of money until I see a process that works to produce a happy Griffin. Period. So we walk up for our meeting into this room. This is my board of directors, per se, in my mind. And all of a sudden, Gerber says, well, how does this business work? And I explain it. Well, I took Henry's formula and I took your 3 personas and I said the visionary said, let's build a service business just like a car manufacturer. And then I went about looking at a marketing system. How will I attract the raw materials? How will I convert those raw materials into the product of a client? How will I shine it all up during the closing process? And how will I wheel it off and sell it to the user of the car? Now, in my case, I don't really sell anything at the end, but I can have a business like that works. Okay. Great, says Henry. Have you documented each of those segments? Yes, I have. Here's exactly what my marketing looks like to acquire the resources or contacts. Here's exactly what my processes look like to convert that person. Here's exactly what my closing process looks, my past client. Great. Do you have assembly line workers to help you? Now, see, this is where you find yourself. See, we're all in common ground right up until then. So you're listening to me as the owner of a brokerage that has already brought on a lot of independent contractors in a symbiotic relationship that's helpful to both of us. But maybe you don't. Maybe you're just that first person being all 3 of these tripolar personalities by yourself. That's why I have the quip at the beginning. Do you have to be tripolar? Yes. Because now you have to come out of the visionary boardroom. You have to get down on the assembly line. You have to, as a technician, now go on the assembly line and do the technical work of marketing, do the technical work of converting somebody through the process. And again, let me just slow that piece down. Converting the relationship from lead, you don't know why they're doing anything and how motivated they are, to prospect, you know exactly why they're going to do something, how motivated they are, and probably now when. And client, you're working with them, trying to bring them into a contract position where then you can move them to the next department, through the door into the next department, okay? But somebody has to do that assembly line work. It's you. See, a lot of you are just doing the assembly line work without a vision for this holistic approach and without any kind of systems. Any kind of simple checklist. It's a managed system starts with a checklist. And I was just about to grab it and hold it up. A yellow legal pad. I always have one next to me, and pens and pencils and highlighters, trying to get it out of my head and make it a system. You get it. It's pretty simple. So let me go back and ask the question now. In our agent plan at the Griffin, we ask the question at this point, are successful agents tripolar? The answer is yes. But you have to understand that they understand and are conscious of the three personas that make up this tripolarity for a successful real estate agent business. One, persona number one, the visionary, a vision for a business that works. Two, persona number two, the manager, the systems manager who has documented how everything should flow. And three, persona number three, the assembly line worker or the person who's doing the technical work of those checklists. I think the key point here that I also like to share with you is that the successful small business owners know that in order to avoid failure, they must become tripolar in these responsibilities. These are responsibilities that go to the independent contractor solely, not the company that you have your license hung at. You, even if you are working as an employee status with a major company, you're still responsible for these three things, okay? So I'll summarize it by saying the greatest challenge for all real estate agents is that they think they can simply sell some properties and that somehow, magically, a business will emerge. Not so. Unfortunately, that's actually delusional and dangerous and sad because a lot of people fail and quit. So ultimately, to be successful, an agent must consciously develop the tripolar personality described above and become a visionary, a system builder, and an assembly line worker all in one persona. All right, remember, you can take immediate action to get this all sorted out by, if you're a seller, by the way, buyer, or agent. We have these plans for each one of you, depending on who you are listening to any one of these episodes. We have a plan for all of you. It's free. It's a free step-by-step what-to-do guide system that if you just go to griffincourses.com, Griffin courses.com, you'll find a free copy of these plans and you can get started in the right direction with or without us. It's our gift to you for just hearing this message. Also, don't forget you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen. But we also post the content on YouTube and other platforms, but especially YouTube. It's easier to Google and find it. So don't forget to subscribe to The Griffin channel. When you see it on YouTube, it says The Griffin. There's a bar, real estate company. That's us. We'd also appreciate it if you would share our content with home sellers and buyers or real estate agents so that they get the help that they need as well. Now, remember, we sign off our podcast the same way every time. Nobody's coming for you. Nobody. So take action and get to work on a plan for buying or selling your next property or becoming, as described here today, a successful real estate agent. And we'll see you in the next episode to help you do just that. Thanks.